I was born in Vienna in 1923, and we had a wonderful life in Vienna. You know, Vienna is the city of waltzes. And I went to school every day, and in 1938, that day, it was in March, I went to school as normal, and an hour later, the teacher comes in and told us to get up and go home. So we were very confused and started walking home. And then as I walked, all of a sudden I saw like a commotion. People were running, and somehow or other the police commissioner took a liking to my father and told him, listen, I'm gonna tell you something. Get out fast. A second time, I will not be able to help you. So when my father came home, he said, well, we have to get out. Now comes the decision where to go. My father wrote a letter to Greece. And of course, they accepted him right away. And they wrote to him, they will send him the visa and everything for the trip. But then my father wrote back he would not go by himself. So they did write back, he can take his family. And they sent us the visa. They sent us all the necessary papers. But first we had to take a train to Italy, Venice, stay there for about 2 weeks, and from there we were going on a ship. So my father was supposed to go first to a friend and wait there. The next day, my mother was supposed to go with my sister, and I would be the last one to leave the house. And as I stepped out of the house, all of a sudden, somebody grabbed me by the throat. Now, young lady, you tell me which way your father went, or you die on the spot. And he was pressing, I could barely breathe. I froze, I didn't move. And he was waiting, and he said, well, young lady, I'm waiting. And I pointed in one direction. Of course, it was the opposite direction. And he said to me, are you sure this is the way? And I blinked with my eyes, and he slowly released me. Now, why he believed me, why he let me go, I will never know. Maybe because I didn't show any fear, or maybe because I didn't beg for my life. I don't know. And I only said one thing, SS, which means the death squad, we have to run. So that night, we packed our bags and we went to the railway station. When we finally crossed the border, we were relieved. We are free. We arrived in Venice, and the ship docked at Brindisi, when all of a sudden, the captain called my father and told him he is not going to take us to Greece. He said, I don't take any Jews to Greece. But my father showed him the papers. He said, I have papers, I have permission from the government. So now we were sitting at that port of Brindisi. We had no money whatsoever because you couldn't take out any money from Vienna. He couldn't even make it a call or send a telegram. We had absolutely nothing. So we were just going to sit there. We sat down on our suitcases and waiting to die, I guess, because there was no way we could do anything anymore. The next day, a ship docked. And then, after a while, my father saw somebody leaving the ship, and it looked like a captain. So my father said to me, Annie, you go over to him and you explain the situation. maybe he will take us on the ship. I was terrified. I really didn't want to go, but my father said, you go. So I approached him, and I spoke a little French, which I had learned in the school in Vienna, and I said one word, and he shook his head. He just stood there, and he looked at me, and he looked at my father, my mother, and my sister, who was a very little scrawny girl, skinny. She was 5.5 years old. And he just looked, and all of a sudden he grabbed my hand. And when he grabbed my hand, I thought again it was the end of it. I closed my eyes and I didn't know what was going to be. And all of a sudden I felt a push, like a pull. And I opened my eyes, and he smiled and he motioned to follow. And a few minutes later, he came back with food and motioned us to eat. We were still we were afraid to move. Everything happened so fast. We just didn't know what was going to be. But finally, after hours, we relaxed, and he only smiled. And we met a merchant from Egypt. He was a Jewish man, and I told him the story. He put his hand in his pocket and took out a bunch of Egyptian pounds and gave it to my father. And my father said, thank you, I don't need the money because I will be paid. I have a job. But he wouldn't hear of it, and he insisted, and he didn't want to take it back. The ship had docked very, very, very early. We were still sleeping. And we opened our eyes, and all of a sudden, I looked at something, and I didn't know what it was. And I turn and I look, and I see a soldier. Then I see another soldier in front of my sister, another one, my mother, and 4 soldiers with a gun. We were just laying there, and we couldn't understand what had happened. The captain had left the ship way before. He didn't know what happened to us. So when that Egyptian merchant passed us and saw, he said to us, don't worry, I will bring the commissioner and I will help you. So we were laying there motionless for, I don't know, a few hours, when finally the commissioner from the city came, and we were released, and we finally left the ship. 2 years later, Hitler attacked Greece. When we were home, when all of a sudden the police entered and said to us, get your clothes, you are coming with us. We had no idea where they're gonna take us, what is going to happen to us. So they took us in a car. And finally, after a long ride, we went into a place. It was a big room where there were all kinds of hundreds of people, mostly German and Austrians. They had 2 big rooms. One was for the women, the other one for the men. We were sleeping on the floor. They gave us 1 meal a day, mostly potatoes. And one day, a man comes in and said, everybody get up and listen. I have a list here, and I will read the names. And those names that I read, you leave. You are free. But when you get home, make sure you don't go out in the street. So he started reading the names, and as he read the names, each person walked out. And I didn't hear our name. I don't know the courage I had. He was finished reading, when all of a sudden I took the courage and I walked over to him and I said, you forgot to read our name. And so he took the list and he looked at it. He said, oh, yes, yes, yes. Whether it was true or not, I don't know, but we were freed. So we went to an apartment of a friend, and now we had to get out. The air raids were getting worse and worse. Every night we had to go underground. We slept in our clothes. We couldn't even take it off. It was terrible. It was difficult to go into the street because you were afraid. Now, in order to get an exit visa, you had to go to the American embassy. So my father went there every day, and when he came back, without anything, he said there were lines and lines of people standing in front of the embassy to get the exit visa. And one day he had an idea. He was going to take my little sister with him, because when you see children, that helps sometimes. He stood there all the way back with my sister, when all of a sudden the ambassador stepped outside to see how big the line was, how many people were there. So when she saw my father with the little girl all the way back, she winked to him and said, "You come in first." So once he came home with the exit visa, we started packing, of course. We didn't have much, very little. Now we had to take a taxi to Port Said, to the harbor. Now, in order to get to the ship, it was not a passenger ship, it was a convoy of 3 ships, which were way out in the ocean because of the air raids. They didn't come too close to the harbor. So you had to take a rowboat to get to the ship. So we stepped into the rowboat, and as started rowing, there was an air raid, and the bombs fell all around us. So we finally reached the ship. We went up on a ladder. Now, of course, it was a cargo. So on the ship were another about maybe 15 refugees like us. Was also a little child and family. So a few minutes later, the captain came. He gave us each a life belt, which we had to wear continuously just in case. And he told us, "This is not a passenger ship. You stay here up on deck all the time. No food or water for you at all, because the food is only for the crew." So they voted on me. I should go at night and try and get some food. Maybe the captain, if I get caught, wouldn't be so harsh on me, because I was a young girl. So every night I went down and found whatever I did. Somehow or other, I wasn't caught. Was I seen? I don't know. And we finally found out that we were going to Port Said on the Suez Canal. Normally, a trip like this would be no more than 2-3 days, but because of the mines, it took double the time. And as we were riding, we were on deck, and we were looking. All of a sudden, there is a tremendous explosion in front of us. The ship in front of us hit a mine and exploded, and there wasn't one human being left. Well, so finally, we arrived at the Suez Canal. It was a desert, complete desert. There were about 10 barracks, each family, a few people, each one in a barrack, one room. And then one day a motorboat came and told us to get on it, and they took us to Cairo. There we were taken under the British. We didn't know really what was going to happen yet, how long we were going to stay there. But in the meantime, we were rather comfortable. My sister returned to school, and I started a job. I met my husband. We got married, and we had a wonderful wedding right at the foot of the pyramids. And of course, he was in the military, and we really didn't know what was going to happen to us. In 1947, in the beginning, the king was ousted, and it started a revolution. And it went mostly against the Jews, and it became very dangerous. So we had to get out again. We didn't know what to do. So you had to have an exit visa. So we waited for the number and went every day to the American embassy to check if the number came in. The American ambassador gave me the number, and then she looked at us and she said to me, of course, my husband didn't have his number, so I would have to go by myself. And she said to me, would you go alone? Are you newlyweds? I said, yes, we are newlyweds. I said, I wouldn't go alone. So when we came back tomorrow, she handed my husband a number. I don't know where she got it from, whether she took it from somebody. But we were so happy. My father was so thrilled with it that I remember he made for her, as a thank you, the most beautiful crystal vase I've ever seen, and I remember bringing it to her. My husband was demobilized the moment he stepped on the ship. The moment he stepped on the ship, he was demobilized. And we finally came here in 1947. We arrived first in Canada, and from Canada we went over here. And then the following year, my sister came, and the following year, luckily, my parents came. And we were all reunited again. It's all, as I believe, fate, you know, the things you live through. But we made it, and we were all together, and we created a life here. And my children were born here. They're all American. So it was a wonderful life.